Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves standing quietly in a dry wind that smells like sun-warmed leather, rusted iron, and coffee that's mostly dust. There's a hat on your head that doesn't quite fit. Your boots are 2 sizes too large, but the man you took them from isn't likely to complain anymore. Somewhere behind you, a dog is barking at something it can't see, and ahead, the road stretches into nothing. It's morning, or maybe afternoon. Hard to tell with this sun, it doesn't rise, it just burns its way upward. Your canteen is empty. Your hands are cracked like riverbeds that gave up long ago. And the town in front of you, the one with 4 buildings and 7 signs advertising whiskey, might be your salvation. Or just another place where no one has soap and everyone has a shotgun. You think the Wild West is all duels and destiny, right? That you'll ride into town with a mysterious past, charm the locals, and leave just before sunset, silhouetted like a legend. No. You ride in chafed, sunburned, and covered in the kind of grime that no longer washes off. Your horse is limping. Your stomach is empty. And the only dramatic shootout you'll witness is someone trying to open a can of beans with a knife and losing. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background. And together, let's ease into tonight's story. You wake up to the sound of nothing. Not silence, nothing. Even the wind has decided it's too early to bother. The air is dry, sharp, and full of tiny promises to ruin your day. Your mouth feels like you've been chewing on wool socks all night, and your tongue might be trying to escape. You reach for your canteen, but there's only 1 drop left. It tastes like regret and old iron. The floor beneath you creaks when you shift because of course it does. This isn't your home. It's someone's abandoned cabin. Or maybe it's just a pile of wood pretending to be a shelter. The roof leaks when it rains, which is rarely, but it leaks hope too, which is far more consistent. The blanket you slept under smells like mildew mixed with whatever the previous occupant had for dinner 3 months ago. Probably beans. Definitely beans. You think the Wild West is freedom, adventure, a blank canvas waiting for you to ride across it. But really it's a sunburn with a hat on. You pull your boots on. They're stiff, cracked, and still hold some of last week's blisters like little souvenirs. One of your socks has fused with your foot. You decide to leave it there. You'll deal with that existential crisis later. Your first task is to find water. There's a well about half a mile away, according to the man who pointed vaguely east yesterday while chewing a stick and lying for sport. So you walk. The sun rises slowly but aggressively, like it's annoyed at the idea of another day. The dust on the path has the texture of flour but tastes like failure. It gets in your eyes, your teeth, the seams of your shirt. You are slowly turning into bread. Dry, overbaked, bitter bread. You finally reach the well. It's there. It even has a rope, but the bucket, gone. Taken, stolen, or used for target practice by someone with poor aim and worse manners. You tie your own cup to the rope using shoelaces and prayer. It creaks as you lower it, scraping like a reluctant ghost. When it hits bottom, you count. 1 second, 2, then nothing. You pull it up. Empty. You sit on a nearby rock, which is only slightly cooler than the inside of your boot. You try to spit in frustration, but your mouth is too dry to produce anything except a vague clicking noise. Like a cricket giving up. Breakfast should be next, right? Something hearty, warm, comforting. But you reach into your saddlebag and find a biscuit so hard it could be used in self-defense. You knock it against the rock just to be sure. It doesn't break. It echoes. You eat it anyway. Slowly, regretfully. Every bite is a small gamble against dental survival. There's a slice of jerky too. It's not meat so much as a philosophical challenge. The morning sun is higher now, and your shadow has already begun plotting its escape. You've eaten. You failed to hydrate. And now it's time to start your real day, whatever that means. Out here, schedules are less about time and more about enduring, because on the frontier, survival isn't about winning. It's about limping forward just fast enough to avoid the next disaster. And that disaster is probably watching you. From behind a bush, or from inside your sock, you smell yourself before you stand up. Not because you're particularly sensitive, but because the air has stopped pretending. The combination is vivid. Sweat, horse, beans from 3 days ago, and something that might be mildew but might also be despair. You lift your arms slightly and reconsider every life choice that's brought you to this moment. There's no soap. There's no towel. There's no mercy. Just a tin basin and a creek that remembers every filthy boot that's waded through it since spring. You were told the frontier was clean, wide open skies, fresh air, natural living. But natural has a smell. A strong one. The kind of smell that could pick a fight. You wander to the creek with a vague hope of bathing. This hope dies quickly. The water is shallow, muddy, and full of what you pray are just insects. It smells like something gave up here. Maybe a cow, maybe a person, possibly both. You splash water on your face and feel a new kind of regret. It's cold enough to reset your brain, which is now wondering why your nose stings and whether that brown foam drifting downstream should be avoided or befriended. Still, you scrub, using your sleeve because a rag would be a luxury, and your shirt already hates you. You try not to swallow anything. You fail. There's no soap. Let's return to that. Soap, in theory, exists, but in practice, it's either a lump of homemade lye so strong it could strip bark off a tree, or a fancy import that costs more than your horse. You have neither. Someone once told you ashes and animal fat make a decent substitute. That person also had no teeth. You decide not to follow in their footsteps, partly out of hygiene, partly out of dental self-preservation. Your hair is a separate tragedy. You run your fingers through it and find at least 2 burrs, 1 beetle, and something that crunches ominously. Cutting it would help, but scissors are rare, and razors require water, time, and optimism. You consider shaving. You consider lighting it on fire. You decide to wear your hat and pretend none of this is happening. Your teeth, well, if you're lucky, you still have most of them. You clean them by swishing whiskey, scraping with a twig, and chewing mint leaves if you're lucky enough to find any that the local goats haven't eaten. Toothpaste is an invention for people with both money and dreams. You have neither. You bite into your jerky and feel something shift. You do not investigate. Clothing does not help. Your shirt was white once. It is now the colour of dust, coffee, and philosophical disappointment. Your socks could legally qualify as biohazards, and your trusty, loyal, sweat-stained hat has fused with your scalp in at least one place. There's no soap. There's no towel. There's no mercy. But you do have the wind, which sometimes blows the blurst of you away, just long enough to fool someone into standing too close. You call that a win. They call it a mistake. And tomorrow you'll smell worse, but you'll also care less, because out here, survival doesn't come with shampoo. Just a nose that gradually gives up. You need to relieve yourself. Not a dramatic crisis, not a medical emergency. Just a quiet, humble need, the kind that creeps up on you after a morning of stale biscuits and creek water that might previously have been soup. The problem, though, is geography. There's no bathroom, no washroom. There's just options, terrible ones. Your first option is the outhouse behind the saloon. It leans at an angle that suggests one stiff breeze might tip it directly into oblivion. Its door is missing. Its seat is cracked. Its smell arrives long before you do. You approach it with the reverence usually reserved for cursed objects. Inside, it's dark. The kind of dark that makes you question whether shadows can become sentient. Something shifts beneath the seat. You don't ask what. You do your business quickly, holding your breath and possibly your soul. There's no toilet paper. Of course not. Leaves, corn husks. Last month's newspaper, these are your friends now. You once tried using a smooth stone. You have not spoken of that day since. You finish and exit feeling slightly more alive, but somehow less human. You wash your hands with dust and a moral apology. If the outhouse is occupied, or worse collapsed, you go with the second option, finding a secluded spot behind a bush, a tree, or anything else that gives the illusion of privacy. Problem is, privacy doesn't really exist out here. Everything has eyes. Coyotes, snakes, strangers passing through. Even the cacti seem judgmental, like spiky witnesses to your shame. You squat, balancing like a reluctant gymnast. The wind picks up. You lose your hat. A beetle climbs onto your boot. You attempt to finish the ritual with dignity, but dignity has already left town. It took the stagecoach west and didn't look back. You once dreamed of being a frontiersman, of living wild, free, and untamed. You did not imagine pooping behind a bush while scanning the horizon for bandits and trying not to step on an anthill. But this is the reality. The Wild West doesn't care about your comfort. It cares only that you finish quickly and move along. You are not a pioneer. You are a temporary nuisance to the landscape. You try building your own latrine, a hole dug with effort and mild optimism. You mark it with stones. You even construct a small cover, 2 boards and a prayer. It lasts 3 days before someone mistakes it for a firewood stash. The next morning, it's gone. Burned. Probably still smouldering. You stand over the ashes and think about civilization, and whether it ever really existed in the first place. So yes, toileting is a daily humiliation ritual invented by demons and perfected on the prairie. There's no toilet paper. There's no fan. There's definitely no dignity. Only the hope that tomorrow the wind will be blowing the other direction. And maybe the beetle will find someone else's boot. Your boots are your most loyal enemies. You need them. You hate them. They protect you from rocks, snakes, cactus needles, and everything else that wants to ruin your feet, which is, in the Wild West, essentially the ground itself. But they also pinch, scrape, blister, and occasionally whisper that today might be the day your toenails mutiny. They were never made for comfort. They were made to last. And by last we mean stay attached to your feet long after your patience has departed. You pull them on every morning with the tenderness of a man removing a splinter with a hammer. The leather is dry, stiff, and smells like something that should have been buried, not stitched. You tried greasing them once with bare fat. It worked for a day. Then it worked too well, and you nearly slid off your horse during a left turn. You still have the scar. The boot still has the dent. You imagine walking through golden fields with the wind at your back and a trail of destiny unfolding before you. Instead, you get gravel paths, uneven routes, and a dust trail that clings to your socks like regret. Each step is a negotiation between momentum and discomfort. Blisters form like surprise parties, painful, unwanted, and often just before lunch. Your socks, if they can still be called that, are more whole than fabric. They bunch, twist, and gather in the exact spots where you don't want pressure. You consider patching them with rabbit fur, but you ate the rabbit last week, and the fur was repurposed into an accidental pillow. It now smells like stew and sorrow. By midday, your feet are humming. Not metaphorically, they actually make a sound when you sit down and peel the boots off. The air hits your skin like cold judgment. Your toes have fused into new shapes. Your heels are covered in what can best be described as topographical maps of bad choices. You find a splinter in your heel that doesn't even hurt anymore. It just exists, like a roommate. Sitting down should bring relief. It doesn't. It just gives you a better view of your socks, which now resemble abandoned cheesecloth. You consider walking barefoot. Then you remember the scorpions, the burrs, and that one rattlesnake who seems to hold a personal grudge. You put the boots back on and sigh, like a man entering a lifelong negotiation with regret. You pass someone on the road. Their boots are newer, cleaner. You hate them immediately. Then you see the limp. You feel better. Not because you're kind, but because pain is the only reliable currency out here. And now you're sure you're at least middle class. You imagine buying new boots. But that would mean finding a general store, convincing the shopkeeper you're not a criminal, and paying with either money you don't have or favors you'll regret. So for now you walk, and limp, and wobble, and walk again. Because there's no carriage, no sidewalk, just the long road your tired soles and a landscape that never stops reminding you that comfort is a luxury reserved for ghost woes. You find a spot near a clump of shade that might once have been a tree, but now just looks like it lost an argument with time. The sun is high, the heat is flat, and your stomach has been issuing passive-aggressive reminders for hours. It's time for lunch, if you can call it that. You reach into your saddlebag, not with anticipation, but with resignation. What you pull out is not so much a meal as a collection of edible suggestions. There's bread, technically. It's hard enough to be considered a weapon, and crumbly enough to dissolve into your lap the second you try to break it. You gnaw on the corner. Your molars protest. The crust flakes like sandstone. Each chew is a negotiation between sustenance and dental hazard. It tastes of flour-old heat, and a faint sadness that might once have been yeast. You pair it with something that resembles cheese. It was yellow once. Now it's more of a brave grey. The smell is bold, very bold. It dares you to eat it. It's not mouldy. It is mould. A confident patch of civilization growing on your lunch. But you're not wasteful. You carve away the edges with a pocket knife, which hasn't been cleaned since it last met a boot sole, and hope for the best. The centre still tastes vaguely like something cows are responsible for, so you call that a win. There's also jerky. Always jerky, tough, dry, and spiced with a philosophy of punishment. It takes 10 minutes to chew a piece small enough to swallow, and when you do, it sticks in your throat like a splinter made of regret. The flavour is somewhere between smoked boot leather and dusty chili. You try to wash it down with water, but of course the canteen is empty again. You chew slower, as if that will summon moisture from the sky. You brought a can of beans once, a luxury, but the can opener broke. You tried stabbing it open with your belt buckle. That day ended with a cut, 3 missing beans, and a newfound respect for metal. You haven't tried again since. Now the can just travels with you, a small, sealed monument to past ambition. You glance at a patch of cactus. It's green, it's thick, and it's technically organic. You wonder if people really do eat cactus. Then you remember the spines, and the story someone told you about a man who tried. That story ended with blood, confusion, and an argument with a horse. You look away. Flies arrive. They hover like critics, unimpressed by your lunch, and deeply interested in your cheese. You swat them away half-heartedly. They return with friends. At some point you stop fighting and just eat faster. You finish the meal still hungry. Not starved, not fainting, just empty in a persistent, echoing way. Like your stomach has accepted it will never truly be full again. You wipe your hands on your pants, which are already crusted with dust, biscuit crumbs, and some emotion you no longer recognize. You stand, slowly. It's not that you're full. It's just that lunch is over because there's nothing left to chew. After lunch, the wind picks up, though wind is a generous word. It's not a breeze or a gust. It's more like the world itself exhaling through a mouth full of dry teeth. You're walking again, because walking is the only way to not be sitting, and sitting makes you feel like the rocks have won. With every step, dust kicks up around your boots, clinging to your trousers, your shirt, your face, the inside of your ears. You start to wonder if you're mostly dust at this point, held together by sweat and stubbornness. The road is not a road. It's a suggestion. A path etched by hooves and bad decisions, winding between brittle shrubs and the occasional dead tree that gestures vaguely at the sky like it's trying to remember a prayer. You follow it because that's what people do out here. Follow the thing that looks like a way forward, even if it ends at a fence, a canyon, or a rattlesnake convention. The wind picks up again. It brings with it grit so fine it could be used to polish bones. It sneaks into your mouth when you talk, into your nose when you breathe, and into your boots just because it can. You feel it between your teeth, under your shirt, in your socks, and possibly in your soul. You try to ignore it. You fail. The itch begins. It starts on your neck, under the collar, then moves to your lower back, where sweat and dust are now holding hands, then your legs, which feel like they've been exfoliated with disappointment. You scratch, then regret scratching, because your skin is already halfway to leather, and doesn't appreciate being reminded. The itch doesn't go away, it migrates. It reinvents itself. It's not an itch anymore, it's a presence. You pass a rock shaped like a face. Or maybe your brain is just bored. You name it Earl. Earl is unimpressed. He's seen worse. You walk on. By now your hat is less a fashion choice and more a defense mechanism. It flaps against your head when the wind gusts, threatening to leave you behind and start a new life in Kansas. You hold it in place with one hand and shield your eyes with the other, squinting into the distance at something that might be a horse, might be a bush, or might be nothing at all. Mirage is a fancy word. Out here it's just wrong again. You take a break, crouch beside a rock, and pour the dust out of your boots. It's enough to fill a coffee cup. You do not have a coffee cup. You do have an overwhelming need to sneeze, but you hold it in, because the last time you sneezed, a crow laughed. You are still not over it. The wind shifts again. The itch persists. The dust returns. There's no escape, only a daily truce with the elements, and even that feels more like surrender. This is the Wild West, itchy, windy, endless, and entirely uninterested in your comfort. You keep walking not because you're going somewhere, but because if you stop, the dust might mistake you for furniture. Eventually you see someone, a shape on the road, a dot that slowly becomes a person, then a horse, then possibly a problem. Out here, everyone is a question first. Friend, bandit, merchant, drifter, corpse in progress. You don't know, and there's no convenient app to check their intentions. So you do what everyone does in the Wild West when faced with a stranger. You squint, you slow down, and you reach for your gun, even if you're only pretending you still have bullets. The other person does the same, because that's the rule. You don't wave, you don't smile, you don't shout howdy unless you've already calculated the odds of surviving a misinterpretation. This is a place where hello and hostility share the same facial expression. You nod, they nod. It's like two dogs circling a food bowl, neither one sure if the other is rabid or just bad at small talk. You get closer. They have a mustache. Not just a mustache, a personality. It curls at the edges like it's trying to form opinions. Their hat is dusty but deliberate. Their boots shine in a way that says, I have stabbed someone over a poker game. You begin to doubt every decision you've made since breakfast. But it's too late to turn around now. Pride is a terrible navigator. They tip their hat. You nod. A moment passes where the entire prairie seems to hold its breath. Then they ride past without a word, as if your existence was merely a background inconvenience. You don't relax. Not yet. You wait until they're a speck again. Only then do you breathe, check that your boots are still on your feet, and count your remaining nerves. 1. Maybe 2. Strangers are everywhere. Men with no last names. Women with too many knives. Kids who've seen more than they should. No one trusts anyone, not really. Trust is a luxury, like soap. Or fences. If someone's smiling, they're either drunk, dangerous, or lost. And if they're all three, congratulations, you're about to make a memory you'll never speak of again. You try staying in town for a night. Maybe it'll be safer. It isn't. At the saloon, every door creaks like it's warning you in Morse code. Every eye watches. Every laugh sounds like it ends in gunpowder. You order a drink. The bartender looks at you like you've asked for his daughter's hand in marriage and a goat. You sip slowly. It tastes like varnish and regret. Someone bumps your shoulder. Was it an accident? Was it an invitation? You don't ask. You just pretend it didn't happen and leave 10 seconds before you stop being lucky. The next day, you're back on the trail. You pass another traveller. This one nods, spits, and mutters something that might be a greeting or a threat. You reply with a sound that can't be traced. That's the dance, the choreography of caution. Because in the Wild West, survival isn't about strength. It's about reading the room when the room is made of dust, suspicion, and the possibility of sudden widowhood. Night falls slowly out here. The sky doesn't darken so much as bruise soft purples, dull oranges, then finally that deep yawning black that feels like it might swallow the world. You've made camp just off the trail, near a cluster of shrubs that promise limited shelter and unlimited insect traffic. Your fire is small, your nerves are frayed, and your bed is the earth, which has not been known for its hospitality. You unroll your blanket. It's thin, frayed, and smells like everything you've done wrong this week. Still, it's better than the dirt, which is cold, sharp, and seems mildly resentful of your presence. You lie down anyway, curling into a shape that's somewhere between fetal and philosophical. The stars blink above, uncaring. The wind makes a sound like someone whispering secrets you're not meant to understand. You try to sleep. You really do. But your body has other ideas. There's a pebble under your spine. You move. Now it's under your hip. You move again. Now it's in your soul. You sigh, adjust your hat over your face, and pretend that your pillow a rolled-up shirt doesn't smell like old beans and nervous sweat. Then come the sounds. Coyotes in the distance, yipping like they're rehearsing for a very bad play. Creaking branches. A rustle that might be a rabbit, or might be something with a taste for exposed ankles. You listen. You try not to breathe too loud. You think about the revolver under your blanket, the one you haven't cleaned in 2 weeks, and you wonder if it still works. You decide not to find out unless absolutely necessary. Sleep isn't restful here. It's tactical. You drift in and out like a ship trying to dock in fog. Every gust of wind feels like a tap on the shoulder. Every snap of a twig jolts you halfway to consciousness. You start dreaming, maybe, and then you're awake again because your foot is cold, or the fire hissed weirdly, or your brain decided to replay that time you looked someone in the eye too long at the general store. You finally start to fade, your muscles loosening just enough, your breath steady, your brain quieter than usual. That's when something howls. Close. Too close. You sit up fast, blanket tangled around your legs like betrayal. You reach for your gun. You wait. Nothing happens. Just the wind still talking to itself. You settle back down, heart pounding. Sleep, once again, is a faraway dream being chased by reality with a stick. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Not peace, not comfort, just the kind of surrender your body makes when it can't fight anymore. You don't sleep because you feel safe. You sleep because your brain gives up. And when the sun rises, you'll wake not refreshed, but slightly more confused than yesterday. Because out here, sleep isn't a luxury. It's a negotiation with fear, bugs, temperature, and whatever made that noise just past the edge of the firelight. You wake up to something crawling. Not the abstract sensation of dread or anxiety, a real, physical, multi-legged thing that is currently deciding whether your ankle tastes like breakfast. You swat, roll, and sit up all at once, causing your blanket to twist itself around your knees, like an overly clingy relationship. You look down. Nothing visible. Which is somehow worse, because now your imagination has entered the game, and it is much, much better at horror than reality. The Wild West is not just home to coyotes, horses, and grim men with revolvers. It is also home to insects, all of them. Every variety. Flying ones, biting ones, whispering ones. You know they don't actually whisper, but when you hear that buzz near your ear in the dead of night, it feels personal. It feels targeted. Mosquitoes are the most consistent threat. They arrive in silent swarms and leave behind red welts the size of buttons. You try swatting them, but it's pointless. They move like guilt-fast, persistent, and always finding the one spot you didn't cover. You once tried wrapping your face in a scarf to block them out. You woke up with 10 bites on your neck and the scarf in the dirt. It had given up. You almost respected it for that. Then there are the spiders. Not the tidy house spiders you might have once tolerated in a different life. These are the outdoorsy type, big, hairy, possibly carrying grudges. You find one under your blanket once and name it Trevor, because naming things helps. Trevor does not return the favor. He leaves when he's ready. You do not argue. Beetles come next. The kind that crunch when you accidentally step on them, which you always do, and which always leaves a texture memory you wish you could erase. They get into your boots, your bedroll, your food. One particularly bold specimen once climbed into your biscuit and made it taste somehow worse. Scorpions are a different category entirely. They are not pests. They are little armored threats with a stinger and an attitude. You check your boots every morning now. It's part of the ritual, like brushing your teeth, except failure comes with venom. You shake your socks out like they insulted your mother. You inspect your blanket with the care of someone handling live explosives. And still, one day you sit down and feel something sharp against your thigh. It's just a thorn, this time, but your soul still tries to escape. You once met a man who claimed he never got bitten, said the bugs didn't like his blood. He smelled like onions and whiskey, and you think the bugs were just exercising good judgment. So you itch, constantly, behind your knee, between your fingers, in places you don't feel comfortable scratching in public. You slap yourself reflexively. Sometimes it's a bug. Sometimes it's just dust with ambition. Either way, you never win. Out here, the food chain is fluid, and some days you're not the predator. You're just a sweaty, itchy buffet waiting for nature to send its waitstaff. The day begins hot. Not warm, not mild. Hot like the sun has drawn a little circle around you and decided you're today's experiment in human slow roasting. There's no shade, except for the shadow your body casts, and even that feels like it's trying to escape. The air is dry and thick, like someone tried to cook the wind but gave up halfway. You try to breathe, but each inhale feels more like sipping smoke than oxygen. You thought the Wild West would be full of heroic heat, the kind you wipe from your brow with purpose. But instead, it's the kind that melts your patience, curls your fingers, and makes you question whether your brain is still functioning or just slowly baking like a forgotten potato. You've stopped sweating, which isn't a victory. It's a warning. Then, of course, comes the cold, because the desert doesn't do moderation. The moment the sun drops, and it doesn't set so much as vanish behind a ridge, like it's clocking out early, the temperature falls like a boot kicked off a cliff. You go from cooking to freezing in under 10 minutes. The wind, which earlier was lazy and hot, is now sharp and smug. It slices through your coat like you offended it personally. You wrap yourself in every layer you own. Shirt, coat, blanket, hat, extra socks tied around your neck like some kind of desperate scarf invention. You huddle near your tiny fire, which crackles bravely but provides about as much warmth as an angry candle. Your fingers stiffen. Your nose goes numb. Your feet stop sending updates. You start wondering if they're still down there at all. And then sometimes there's rain. Not soft, gentle, cleansing rain. No, that would be too kind. This rain arrives in sudden sheets, angled sideways, smelling of mud and electricity, and carried by thunder that sounds like the sky is coughing up bad decisions. Your blanket gets wet. Your boots fill up. Your mood, already damp, goes fully soggy. You shelter under whatever you can find: a rock ledge, a tree stump, a poorly trained horse. It doesn't help. The water finds you. Water always finds you. Dust storms are their own chapter of misery. They roll across the plains like they're looking for someone to blame, and they usually pick you. Visibility drops to hope for the best, and every breath tastes like regret and road. You cover your mouth with your sleeve, your eyes with your hat, and your soul with a blanket of defeat. When it's over, everything you own is coated in a fine layer of history, dirt, and tiny rocks that will never leave your socks again. So yes, the weather out here is impressive. Impressively cruel. The sun cooks, the wind bites, the cold numbs, the rain drenches, and the dust storms exfoliate your hope. And tomorrow, it'll all happen again, in a slightly different order, just to keep things interesting. You've written a letter. Somehow. You don't remember exactly when the days blur out here, but the handwriting is yours, and the ink stain on the corner definitely is. It's addressed to someone 3 towns over, or maybe 10, depending on who's doing the counting and whether the river's flooded again. You fold it carefully, as if that will protect it from everything it's about to endure. Then you walk to the nearest post office, which is at best a man with a sack and opinions. He's not behind a counter. He's leaning against a wall, whittling a stick with more focus than he gives to human interaction. His mustache is uneven, his boots are unlaced, and his horse tied loosely to a post looks like it's considering a career change. You ask if he can take your letter. He grunts, takes it, and shoves it into a leather bag already swollen with unsent promises. You ask how long it'll take. He says something that might be a week or we'll see. Then he leaves. No receipt. No tracking number. No assurance. Your letter is now a passenger on the world's slowest gamble. Mail, you learn, is not a system out here. It's a wish with legs. The rider might make it. He might not. The letter might get soaked, burned, stolen, or mistaken for kindling by someone with cold fingers and a limited sense of literacy. Sometimes it never arrives. Sometimes it arrives 3 months late, smelling like whiskey and someone else's tobacco. And when it does show up, the person you wrote to may already have moved, married, or mysteriously vanished. The Pony Express sounds romantic, doesn't it? Speed, bravery, young riders galloping through the wilderness. But reality is slower, sweatier, and more splinter-filled. Most carriers are not heroic teens, they're weather-beaten men with inconsistent hygiene and strong opinions on boots. The horses are tired. The roads aren't roads. They're trails, if you're lucky, or guesses if you're not. Sometimes riders travel at night. Sometimes they don't travel at all. There are bandits, wolves, rivers pretending to be puddles and puddles pretending to be rivers. You think about sending another letter. Then you remember the cost. Not just the coin you don't have, but the emotional toll of watching your words handed over to someone whose coat is held together by twine and quiet desperation. You decide to wait. Maybe deliver it yourself someday. Maybe not. Receiving mail is no better. One morning, a rider throws a bundle at the saloon door. It lands with a thump and a puff of dust. You dig through it. There's something addressed to you. It's damp, slightly chewed, and smells like the inside of a saddlebag, which of course it is. But it has your name, almost spelled right. You open it, and for a brief moment, you're connected to someone far away. Then you realize it's outdated. The person wrote it weeks ago, maybe months. The things they mention already happened, or didn't. And still, somehow, it matters. Because out here, even the slowest message is proof that someone remembers you exist. You've decided to travel. Not by foot, you've already had enough blisters to last 3 lifetimes. Not by horse, yours went lame 3 counties back, and is currently living its best life in someone else's field, probably under a fake name. That leaves you one noble option, the stagecoach. A marvel of wooden engineering, leather suspension, and human discomfort concentrated into one rolling rectangle of pain. The stagecoach arrives late. It always does. You wait for 3 hours in the sun, then 2 more in the shade of a nearby rock that doesn't like you. When it finally pulls up, it's not so much stopping as it is collapsing forward in slow motion. The horses look exhausted. The driver looks more exhausted. The entire contraption creaks like it's confessing a secret with every turn of the wheel. You climb in. There's room for 6 people, which means 8 are already inside, and a 9th is arguing with the driver about sitting on the roof. You squeeze into a corner. It smells like dust, sweat, and fear, specifically the kind of fear that results from not knowing when your next bathroom will appear, or whether you'll survive the next bump in the road with all your ribs on sew. The seat is not padded. It is wooden, thin, and unforgiving, like a judge with a grudge. Your knees touch the person opposite you. You apologize. They grunt. You both pretend not to exist. The man beside you is chewing something. It is possibly tobacco, possibly beef jerky, possibly the last remnant of his moral compass. Whatever it is, he spits frequently, and he misses the spittoon every time. The driver cracks the whip, and the stage lurches forward like a reluctant ox. You're off. Every bump in the trail sends your spine into negotiation with your hat. Every turn tilts the coach just far enough to make you picture your obituary. You don't talk, because talking requires breathing, and breathing means inhaling the passenger next to you, who smells like he lost a bet to a skunk and then tried to win it back. You pass scenery. Probably. It's hard to say. The windows are dusty, and your neck hurts from holding your head at an angle that keeps it from knocking into the coach wall. Occasionally, you stop to change horses, or because the wheel needs retying, or because someone fell out and nobody noticed until the driver did a head count. You eat dry crackers during the break. They taste like regret. Eventually the coach stops. Not because you've arrived, but because the driver needs a nap, the horses need water, and your sanity needs a moment to reattach. You climb out stiffly, like furniture with legs. Your spine cracks in 3 languages. You look back at the coach. It creaks. It waits. It will continue. And so will you. Because in the West, travel is less about arriving and more about surviving long enough to forget where you started. You hear it before you see it, a faint clicking, like a nervous beetle learning Morse code. The sound travels along the wire, thin and constant, stretched across poles that lean slightly, as if embarrassed by their own optimism. This is the telegraph, the closest thing the Wild West has to magic. Words real, living words travelling faster than horses, faster than wagons, faster than you when you see a snake. It's a marvel. It's a miracle. It's also mostly broken. The local telegraph office is not much of an office. It's a shack with a stove, a desk, and a man named Carl who never blinks. Carl speaks in short bursts, the same way the machine does. You suspect he might be part of it. His fingers hover over the key like he's waiting for permission from a god no one believes in anymore. You hand him a note. He scans it. Then he asks you if you're sure. You nod. You are, though you also know that being sure doesn't mean the message will arrive. Sending a telegraph isn't cheap. Each word costs money, which means every sentence must be carved down to its bones. You find yourself rewriting thoughts like a minimalist poet with a headache. Dear brother, I miss you terribly and hope you are well becomes brother. Alive? Me? It's not elegant, but elegance went the way of your last paycheck. Carl taps the message into the machine. Each click feels like it should be momentous, but it mostly sounds like a mechanical squirrel in distress. You imagine the message travelling through copper veins, out into the horizon, bouncing from town to town like a nervous rumour. Somewhere, another Carl will receive it, squint at the scrawl, and deliver it to someone who may or may not still be in town, may or may not be alive, and may or may not remember who you are. Reception isn't guaranteed. The wires get cut by storms, by bandits, by cows with attitude. Messages get jumbled. One man once asked for his wife to send money for boots. What he received was monkey for bullets. That was a confusing week for everyone. You try to listen to the clicks, to guess what they're saying, but the language is coded, and your brain is already tired from counting beans and avoiding dysentery. You sit in the corner and sip from a cup of something warm. Carl calls it coffee. It tastes like regret filtered through an old boot. When the reply arrives, if it ever does, Carl reads it aloud, slowly, monotone, like each word has personally betrayed him. Still you feel something. A tug, a spark. The world just got smaller for a moment. Someone far away thought of you, used words on purpose, paid money to make your name travel on a wire. And even if it makes no sense when it gets here, even if it's late, scratched, or sounds like it came from a drunk raccoon, it's still connection. And out here, connection is as precious as soap, sleep, or socks without holes. You arrive in town with sore feet, dry eyes, and the faint hope of finding a bed that isn't just a philosophical concept. The building with the inn sign sways slightly when the wind hits it, and the porch boards creak in a way that suggests they've stopped resisting rot and are now collaborating with it. You walk inside, half expecting comfort, half expecting tetanus. What you get is both. The innkeeper is a man with a permanent squint, a missing eyebrow, and a ledger that's older than the country. He doesn't ask for your name, just whether you've got coin and don't snore. You lie about both. He hands you a key. It's metal, rusted, and possibly symbolic. Room 4, he says, up the stairs, third on the left, unless the door's missing, in which case, just take whichever one doesn't already have a goat in it. The hallway smells like old soup and bad decisions. You pass a broom propped against the wall. It's decorative. No one's swept in weeks. You reach your room. The door sticks. You shoulder it open with the force of someone who knows there's no other option. Inside, the space is generous in the way that a box can feel generous after you've been sleeping outside. There's a bed. technically. It's a frame with something softish on top, and a blanket that looks like it lost a fight with a raccoon. You sit down slowly, as if the mattress might bite. It doesn't. But it makes a noise that suggests it has regrets. There's a window, barely. It opens if you breathe on it wrong, and closes only after a 15-minute argument and 2 splinters. The view is inspiring if you enjoy looking at the back of a saloon and a suspiciously loud pig. You try to undress, but the room doesn't lock, and the door handle falls off when you try. You put it on the floor and pretend you feel safer. The bed, once you commit to lying down, is a study in betrayal. The springs are arranged like a poorly plotted revenge. One stabs you in the shoulder, another pokes your hip, and the third seems to have a personal vendetta against your left rib. The pillow is both lumpy and flat, like a bag of flour someone sat on during a fistfight. You try to find a comfortable position. You don't. Downstairs, someone laughs too loudly. Then someone else yells. A third person coughs in a way that suggests lung possession. You close your eyes, then open them again to kill a mosquito that's been orbiting your nose like it's studying you for science. Still, you're inside. There's a roof. There's a wall. Most of the time, that's enough. And tomorrow, when you check out, if the stairs are still there, you'll forget just how bad the night was. Until the next inn, and the next bed, and the next betrayal. Your saddle buckle snapped this morning. It made a noise somewhere between a sigh and a threat, then flung itself into the dirt, as if resigning from its duties. So now you find yourself outside the town blacksmith's workshop, a building that looks like it was built by anger and held together by soot. The sign above the door reads repairs in letters that are barely legible under a thick crust of old smoke and indifference. Inside, the air is an entire climate. Hot, thick, metallic. You breathe it in and immediately feel older. There's a forge in the center glowing like a small sun with boundary issues, and tools scattered across every surface like they've been tossed there by a tornado with a grudge. The blacksmith himself is a man who could bend iron with a frown, and possibly does. His arms are coated in soot, his apron is more patched than leather, and his beard looks like it's been through several minor fires. You hold out the broken buckle. He doesn't speak, just grunts, takes it, and stares at it the way a philosopher might regard a suspicious tomato. Then he disappears behind a curtain of smoke and metal noises. You're not sure what's happening. There's banging, hissing, cursing in at least 2 languages, and something that sounds like a small explosion followed by an accusatory sneeze. You wait. This is how things are repaired out here. Not carefully, not gently, but violently, loudly, and usually while the fixer mutters things about stupid design and people who shouldn't own horses. The blacksmith returns eventually, holding what looks like your buckle, except now it has more rivets, less symmetry, and a smell like lightning's armpit. He hands it over without ceremony. It's better now, you assume, or at least angrier. You pay in coin, because bartering with a man who sleeps next to molten metal seems unwise. He nods. You nod. It's a transaction based on mutual respect and shared discomfort. As you leave, he's already back at the forge, striking metal with the determination of someone punishing fate itself. You admire it. You also never want to make him upset. Next door is the tinker, a smaller man, wiry, jittery, with eyes like pocket watches and fingers stained with oil and suspicion. He fixes watches, lamps, bits of machinery, and anything delicate that the blacksmith would simply smash into a better shape. His shop is quieter, filled with ticking, tapping, muttering, and the faint smell of kerosene and broken dreams. You hand him a busted lantern. He flips it over, frowns, and declares it repairable, but offended. You nod. He works silently, except for the occasional hum that may or may not be a hymn. When he's done, the lantern glows again, a little crooked, a little flickery, but whole. You thank him. He doesn't answer, just dives into the guts of a broken clock like it owes him money. So yes, things can be fixed in the Wild West. Just not the way you expect. It won't be pretty. It won't be polite. But it'll work. Probably. And if not, well, there's always more metal. And more fire. You push open the door of the general store, and it greets you with a jingle made from an old spoon and what might have once been a cowbell. The air inside is thick with the smell of tobacco, dried apples, dust, and whatever animal walked through last week without anyone noticing. The floorboards creak with every step, not from age, but from gossip. They've heard every secret in town and aren't subtle about squealing. Behind the counter stands a woman with a face like a well-folded map full of lines, stories, and routes you probably don't want to follow. She looks at you the way a banker looks at a wooden nickel. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Respect here is not given, it's accrued like barnacles on a slow-moving ship. The shelves are an arrangement of ambition and improvisation. Flour next to rifle cartridges. Pickles beside nails. Soap the expensive kind, locked behind glass, like it's a sacred relic, sits just out of reach. There's a barrel of beans, a jar of licorice sticks, and a basket of eggs so old they might legally qualify as fossils. You need socks, tobacco, and a miracle. 2 of those might be available. The third, probably not today. You grab what you can afford. 1 pair of socks with more hole than cloth. A roll of tobacco that smells faintly of someone else's pocket. And a tin cup that promises to hold liquid but leaks hope. You bring it to the counter. The woman rings you up using a small slate, a piece of chalk, and a skeptical expression. The price seems high. Everything seems high. Except your spirits, which are conveniently low. As you fumble for coins, a man walks in and immediately begins complaining about his boots, his neighbour, and the weather in that order. The shopkeeper doesn't respond, just slides him a tin of lard and a side-eye that could flatten wallpaper. Another customer is arguing with a child over a jar of buttons. Someone sneezes, loudly, twice, then mutters a curse at the flour sack that startled them. You finally pay. The coins vanish into a drawer that bites fingers and groans with the wariness of decades. The shopkeeper offers you a receipt in the form of a shrug. You take your items and move aside, careful not to knock over the precarious pyramid of molasses tins that seems to be held together by anxiety and string. Before leaving, you ask if she's got any mail behind the counter. She does. 1 envelope. Damp. Slightly torn. Addressed to someone who died last year. You take it anyway. Maybe for the paper. Maybe for the memory. Or maybe because no one likes to leave empty-handed. You step back into the light with your bag of almost useful supplies, a lighter wallet, and the deep, comforting knowledge that nothing in that store will ever be new, and no one will ever be in a hurry. Out here, the general store isn't just where you shop. It's where you hear what broke, who left, and how many ways a person can ask for coffee and get disappointment instead. You wander into town expecting authority to look like a man with a badge, a big voice, and a bigger moustache. Someone who controls chaos with 1 raised eyebrow and enforces justice with the gentle firmness of a well-trained thunderstorm. What you find is a man named Albert, sitting on a rocking chair with a fishing rod that hasn't touched water in weeks. He's the mayor, apparently. At least, that's what the hand-painted sign above his chair says. It also says closed on Sundays and no chickens. Albert doesn't wear a uniform. He wears a vest with more pockets than fabric and a pair of spectacles that slide down his nose like they're looking for an escape route. You ask him about town rules. He says, don't light fires inside buildings, don't shoot the piano player, and if you see a goat wearing a hat, return it to Mrs. Ackers. You write none of this down. He wouldn't, either. Then there's the marshal. You find him near the jail, cleaning his boots with a rag that's seen better years. His badge is real, though a little bent, and his revolver has a name carved into the handle, not his name, just a name. He tells you the jail holds 1 person comfortably, 2 uncomfortably, and 3 only if none of them breathe at the same time. He also tells you he once arrested a man for yelling at a cactus. You believe him. You believe everything he says. Law enforcement out here is more suggestion than structure. There's no real force. Just a handful of tired men who understand that keeping order mostly involves sitting still and hoping no one's drunk enough to start shooting before lunch. The marshal walks slowly. He nods at people like Hez, reminding them they exist, but also letting them know he's watching. His horse is smarter than most people in town. His dog is smarter than his horse. If a fight breaks out at the saloon, the marshal sighs first. Then he finishes his drink. Then he walks over, taps the instigators on the shoulder, and reminds them gently but firmly that he knows where they sleep. If that doesn't work, he waves his revolver a little, not like he's threatening, just dusting it off. Usually that's enough. As for the mayor, he's more of a mascot. He listens to complaints, forgets them immediately, and signs paperwork only if someone puts a pen in his hand and whispers what to write. Still, people respect him. Not because he commands it, but because he's been there the longest and once wrestled a runaway pig in front of the church. That kind of thing sticks. You leave the meeting with no clearer sense of law, but a better understanding of how peace survives out here through familiarity, tolerance, and just the right amount of laziness. Outlaws tend to move on. Locals tend to look away. And everyone quietly agrees that order isn't a system, it's a mood. You walk past the schoolhouse just after dawn and already hear shouting, not the panicked kind, but the kind that suggests a small person has learned a new curse word and is trying it out on a chicken. The building is modest. One room, one bell, one window that won't open and another that won't close. The front door hangs at a polite angle, and the word school is etched into a plank above it with the conviction of someone who carved it while being bitten by mosquitoes. Inside, it's warm, dusty, and smells faintly of ink, chalk, and fear. The benches are uneven. The floor creaks in specific places, as if warning you not to linger too long. There's a stove in the center for heat in the winter, which in the summer becomes a monument to unnecessary suffering. The walls are lined with a few maps, some old grammar posters, and a portrait of a founding father who looks disappointed in everything, especially you. The teacher is a woman named Miss Bickle. She has a ruler, a stare that can silence stampedes, and a wardrobe that suggests she's won several fistfights with her laundry line. She teaches all ages, all subjects, and occasionally mediates between two boys fighting over who owns which stick. Her voice is calm, firm, and capable of cutting through the thickest misbehavior like butter through dynamite. The children are many. Some bright-eyed, some suspicious, most covered in a fine layer of jam, dirt, or both. They range in age from can spell their name to can spell someone else's, and has tried forging a note. Discipline is creative. Chalkboard lines, quiet corners, extra Latin sentences. The ruler, while rarely used, sits on the desk like a warning letter from fate. You try to sit in the back, just to rest your legs. A small child offers you a frog. Another asks if you're married. A third just stares at you while slowly eating a carrot, maintaining unbroken eye contact. You decide to stand. Lessons go from spelling to sums, from geography to the moral pitfalls of laziness. At one point, someone is instructed to recite a poem. They forget the words panic and invent an entirely new poem involving a snake, a barrel, and someone named Gerald. Miss Bickle does not flinch. She simply says, creative interpretation, B-. There are no school lunches, only lunch breaks. The children scatter at noon to find shade and possibly ambush each other with pine cones. You sit near the fence and eat your remaining biscuit, which breaks a tooth. A boy near you mutters, "You shouldn't eat those unless you're mad at your mouth." You nod. He's not wrong. School resumes with the ringing of a bell that's mostly rust and memory. The day ends when the sun gets low and the children are too hungry to pretend they're learning anymore. They file out, some still whispering about Gerald. Miss Bickle begins sweeping. She looks tired, invincible, and absolutely not to be crossed. Out here, the schoolhouse isn't just for learning, it's for surviving knowledge, sorting out squabbles, and making sure the next generation can spell coffin without asking how to build one. Sunday morning arrives not with trumpets, but with the sound of someone arguing with a goat outside your window. You rise slowly, not because you're rested, but because the mattress has given you a cramp in a location previously unknown to science. The sun is bright, the wind is nosy, and the town is oddly quiet, not peaceful, just holding its breath like a child hiding under a table. It's church day. The church sits at the center of town, taller than the other buildings by maybe half a story, and one extra layer of paint. The steeple leans slightly west, as if trying to sneak off without anyone noticing. The bell is cracked but proud, and when it rings, it sounds like an old man remembering something unpleasant. People gather in small groups outside, adjusting hats, smoothing clothes, and pretending they don't secretly resent each other. You walk in and sit on a pew that was clearly designed by someone who believed comfort was a moral failing. The wood is polished smooth by generations of shifting posteriors and desperate fidgeting. The cushion, if present, is symbolic more gesture than function. You try not to sigh too loudly. The woman in front of you already suspects you of something, and she has a neck that swivels like an owl whenever whispers begin. The preacher is a man of height, voice, and mysterious moods. His name is Reverend Kettle, though no one's sure if that's his birth name or something he won in a bet. He begins the service with a hymn so slow you have time to regret several life choices between verses. Then comes the sermon, a rambling journey through scripture, weather updates, recent births, a chicken theft, and a reminder that the bake sale will be held in the cemetery again, because that's where the shade is. Everyone nods solemnly, even the sinners. Afterward, the true ritual begins: gossip. Outside, under the guise of handshakes and friendly smiles, the entire town exchanges news, speculation, and at least 3 different versions of a scandal involving a barrel of lard and someone's missing boots. No one confirms anything, but everyone leaves knowing something they shouldn't. Children run in circles. The preacher's wife passes out cookies that taste like they were made of commitment and old flour. You accept one. You chew politely. You try not to cry. Someone asks if you're new in town. You lie and say you're passing through. They nod like that makes sense. Then they ask if you've seen the goat. You haven't. They look disappointed. You walk home slowly, the sermon still echoing faintly in your ears, half lost among the wind and the distant complaints of chickens. Church here isn't about salvation. It's about recognition, presence, the act of showing up, sitting down, staying awake, and then quietly agreeing to ignore each other's sins until next Sunday. Because out here, forgiveness is important, but plausible deniability is even better. At the edge of town, past the crooked fence and just beyond the last respectable tree, sits the undertaker's building. It doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't need to. Everyone knows where it is, and nobody wants to go there unless they have to, or unless they're already on their way by force of circumstance. The windows are always closed, the curtains drawn, and the front steps never dusty, as if death is the only thing out here that knows how to sweep. You step inside because curiosity is stronger than good sense. The air is cool and still, like someone forgot to wind up the atmosphere. There's a desk, some ledgers, and a smell that's not unpleasant but very specific, like old varnish, dried herbs, and quiet. The undertaker appears from a back room as if summoned, moving like a thought you weren't supposed to have. His clothes are black, his hair combed with severe intention, and his voice soft in the way that makes everyone else feel too loud. He speaks in full sentences with punctuation. No slang, no muttering. It's unsettling. He explains the cost of a simple coffin, the availability of plots, and whether or not pine boxes are in fashion this season. You nod. You aren't shopping. You just didn't want to walk past again without knowing. He hands you a brochure. It's handwritten. The margins are straight. You leave it on the desk. Out behind the building is the cemetery. Fenced in, loosely. The gates hang unevenly but remain open at all times, out of either hospitality or pessimism. Most of the headstones are modest. Some are misspelled. A few just say unknown in capital letters, like the town collectively gave up on further questions. There's a bench under a dry tree that no one ever sits on unless they're thinking very hard about life, or very hard about ending it. The gravedigger, whose name might be Bill or might be Dirt, works quietly with a shovel and a hat that hasn't come off in years. He doesn't talk much, just digs. The earth here is stubborn, full of rocks, roots, and bad ideas, but he moves through it like someone who's stopped taking its resistance personally. You watch him work for a while. He nods once. That's the full conversation. You ask if he ever gets tired of it, the digging, The silence, the company of names that never respond. He shrugs, says, "Folks always need planting," and goes back to work. It's not grim. It's just routine. You begin to understand that out here, death isn't a surprise. It's just another appointment delayed if you're lucky, early if you're not, and always arriving without proper paperwork. You leave the cemetery slower than you entered. The town feels louder now, more animated, like it's trying too hard to forget where it ends. And as you pass by the undertaker's porch again, you see a new pine box being delivered, carefully, respectfully, as if someone might wake up and complain about the craftsmanship. Out here, the living barely hold things together. But the dead, they stay where they're told. The first rule of eating in the Wild West is simple. If it doesn't try to bite you first, it's probably dinner. The second rule is less forgiving. If you have to ask what it is, you don't really want to know. You wake up hungry, not mildly peckish, but the kind of hunger that makes you look at your own boots with curiosity. Breakfast is a concept, not a guarantee. You check your supplies. There's jerky, of course. There's always jerky. It's dry, brown, and vaguely shaped like something that used to moo. You gnaw for peace and immediately regret it. It's tough, leathery, and tastes like smoke, old regret, and a hint of whatever it was stored next to. You chew for a long time. It's not a meal. It's an exercise in persistence. You try beans next. Cold beans from a tin that you opened with a knife that now has both your thumbprint and a small piece of thumb on it. They're soft, salty, and coated in the taste of metal and disappointment. But they fill the space in your stomach that was starting to echo. You eat in silence, except for the occasional crunch of something that maybe wasn't a bean. Lunch doesn't happen. Not really. By midday, you're riding or walking or pretending to do both, and food is more of an afterthought than a plan. You find some wild greens, the kind you think you remember being edible from a conversation someone had near a campfire once. You nibble. It's bitter. It's damp. It reminds you of being a child and chewing on paper out of spite. Still, it doesn't kill you. You take that as a win. If you're lucky, someone in town is roasting something rabbit, maybe, or something less clearly defined. You follow the smell like a sleepwalker. You find a stall. The meat is charred on the outside and raw in the middle, and the man selling it has the same look as someone who's lost 3 fingers and didn't like the first 2 anyway. You buy it. You chew carefully. You tell yourself it's probably rabbit. You don't ask questions. Dinner, if it happens, is fire-cooked beans again. Maybe you toss in a strip of bacon, if it hasn't turned blue yet. You tried fishing once, but the river only offered laughter and leeches. You tried trapping once, but you caught your own boot and a strong sense of failure. So you eat what's there. You ration. You chew slow. You give names to your food so you can pretend it's company. Hello, bean number 12. Please don't crunch. Sometimes you find an old biscuit in your bag and weigh the pros and cons of dental damage versus starvation. Sometimes you pick the biscuit and lose a molar. You never really win. Survival food out here isn't about pleasure. It's not even about taste. It's about staying alive long enough to forget how good things used to smell. And out here, the only flavor that sticks around is salt, smoke, and the faint aftertaste of your own lowered expectations. You think you know thirst, the mild dryness after a long walk, the casual sip of water from a metal cup. But the Wild West has a different kind of thirst. It doesn't tap on your shoulder politely. It sits on your chest like a mule with unfinished business and whispers, "Good luck finding a stream that won't kill you." Water out here is not just rare, it's mischievous. You find a puddle that looks promising, and 5 minutes later your stomach is staging a revolt that would qualify as a small rebellion in any civilized country. The water isn't just dirty. It's ambitious, hosting entire ecosystems of floaty things you'd rather not name. You've learned to judge water by sight, smell, and whether any frogs nearby look nervous. You try to boil it. Always boil it, they said. But firewood isn't free, pots aren't fast, and sometimes the smoke gives away your position to something with either too many legs or too many questions. You boil it anyway. The bubbles rise like hope, but the taste never improves. It always tastes faintly of tin, dust and the regret of wherever you dipped your canteen. Sometimes you find a stream trickling, clear, almost friendly. You squat beside it with reverence, as if approaching a rare artifact. You taste cautiously. Then you remember that clarity means nothing. Cholera is invisible, dysentery is sneaky, and your intestines are more trusting than they should be. You drink anyway. Slowly. Because thirst is louder than common sense, and your body would rather take its chances than chew another pine needle just to feel busy. In town, water comes from a well, if you're lucky. You pump, and the creaking handle argues back like it owes you nothing. The water slushes out thick and cold, sometimes with company a bug, a leaf, a smell that reminds you of old socks and broken promises. Still, it's technically clean. You drink it warm because no one has ice. You drink it fast because someone's always waiting. You drink it gratefully, even as you try to forget what might be floating just out of sight. If you're wealthier, or pretending well, someone might sell you rainwater, collected carefully, stored poorly, and priced like it contains miracles. You pay anyway. Rain is rare. Rain is clean. Rain doesn't come when you ask. Sometimes it doesn't come for weeks, and you find yourself staring at the sky like it owes you money. When it does come, it barrels in sideways, fills your boots, soaks your food, and disappears just before you manage to hold out a bucket. You dream of rivers sometimes, clear, babbling, full of fish and forgiveness. Then you wake up coughing dust and chew your tongue to summon saliva. The canteen is half full or half empty, depends on whether you're still hopeful or just delirious. Out here, survival isn't about eating. It's about drinking carefully, suspiciously, and with the understanding that every sip might be a tiny gamble against death disguised as refreshment. You wash your hands with bacon grease. Not because you want to, not because it makes sense, but because it's the only semi-liquid thing you have that moves when warmed and doesn't immediately crawl away. Soap exists, in theory sold in town behind locked cabinets and wrapped like it's a precious stone. You held a bar once. It smelled like old flowers and punishment. You put it back before it dissolved in your sweaty fingers from sheer disbelief. Bathing out here is less a ritual and more a desperate compromise. You find a stream. You check for snakes, bugs, frogs with opinions. You dunk your head, splash some water on your arms, and pretend that the result is an improvement. It's not. You still smell like old leather and nervous exhaustion. But now you're damp, which in this climate just means you'll smell even worse later. Some folks keep tin tubs. If you're lucky, you've seen one. If you're unlucky, you've tried to use one. The water is either boiling or frigid, never between. Privacy is rare. You bathe with your boots nearby, one eye open, and your hat still on because modesty matters less than readiness when a raccoon strolls past looking interested in your towel. What passes for soap is usually made from animal fat and strong opinions. Homemade lye bars, rough enough to strip barn paint, and tender enough to leave your skin feeling like it lost a bet. You scrub anyway. You try to ignore the smell like burned bacon and someone else's sadness. Then you rinse off with more bacon grease because the water ran out and now you're committed to this path. Hair washing is a luxury. You brush with your fingers, you remove burrs, and you pretend that your scalp isn't plotting a rebellion. Some folks oil their hair with bare fat. You tried that once. It kept the hair down. It also kept everyone else away. You decided social hygiene was more important than scalp discipline. For teeth, there's charcoal, crushed into a powder, packed onto a cloth, rubbed in circles until your gums politely ask you to stop. It leaves your mouth tasting like burnt toast and compromise. But at least it masks the smell of last week's beans. You tried brushing with a twig once. The twig won. It splintered, and you spent a whole evening removing bark from your molars with a whittling knife. You change clothes rarely. Not because you're lazy, but because laundry means finding water, hauling it, boiling it, scrubbing it, wringing it, drying it, and then discovering you just washed a shirt that still smells like horse and vinegar. So you rotate between outfits that share a single unifying scent, damp history. You learn to live with the smell. Everyone does. Because after a while you stop noticing. The stink becomes a second skin, a badge of perseverance, a cologne called endurance by dirt. And if someone ever complains, you just smile and point out they're not exactly fragrant either. Out here, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's closer to wishful thinking, wrapped in bacon grease and hung to dry on a fence post between the wind and your last ounce of dignity. You get a fever. Not a polite one, not the kind that makes you lie down and sip broth while someone reads to you in a gentle voice. This fever kicks down your door, throws your boots out the window, and sets up camp behind your eyes with a drum and a torch. You sweat like a guilty preacher and mumble things even you don't understand. Your hands shake. Your thoughts wobble. And that's when someone suggests delicately that you might need a doctor. The local doctor is not what you'd call reassuring. He wears a coat that was once white, now a patchwork of brown stains and philosophical uncertainty. His medical bag contains a saw, some thread, a bottle of something flammable, and a collection of herbs that look like they were picked by someone with a grudge against flowers. He greets you by asking how long you've been dying, and then chuckles like he's made that joke before, and it never gets less alarming. He examines you with a look that suggests he's solving a riddle, not treating a person. He nods a lot. He frowns. He taps your knee and asks if your aunt ever had gout. You tell him you don't know. He prescribes rest, water, and a powder made from dried dandelions, old chalk, and possibly optimism. You ask what's in it. He says medicine. You stop asking. There is no hospital, just a cot in the back room of the apothecary which smells like honey, mildew, and poor decisions. You lie down. You sweat more. You dream of rivers that turn into snakes and sandwiches that scream when you bite them. The doctor visits once a day to check your pulse and remind you that recovery is mostly about not dying too quickly. If your fever breaks, it's considered a personal achievement. People congratulate you with dry biscuits and side eyes because no one wants to get too close in case you're still contagious. If your fever doesn't break, you're moved to the shaded side of the cemetery discussion, where polite coughing and unspoken goodbyes take over the room. Surgery, if it comes to that, is performed on a table that doubles as the butcher's workspace 3 days a week. Anesthesia consists of biting down on something, usually leather, sometimes a friend's belt, while the doctor recites calming facts about horses. Stitches are done with thick thread, and the kind of focus usually reserved for tax returns. Infection is not optional. It's a tradition. You survive, maybe. You sit up, blinking at the light like it owes you money. The doctor tells you not to do anything strenuous, then immediately asks you to help him move a barrel of laudanum. You say yes, because you can't afford to say no. Out here, health is less about healing and more about not falling apart faster than the land around you. The body is expected to cope. Medicine is a gesture. Survival is the diagnosis. And recovery. It's mostly just waking up and deciding to stand again, even if the floor still looks like it's breathing. There's no pharmacy. There's a field. A slope just beyond the last shack in town, where plants grow with no plan and even less mercy. The people here don't have prescriptions. They have neighbors who collect things with names like liverwort, snake root, and definitely not poison, probably. You go out there with an old woman named Mabel, who insists she's not a healer, just someone who remembers what doesn't kill you. Mabel carries a basket and a knife. Her fingers are stained green and brown from decades of confident guessing. She shows you plants that look like salad, smell like soap, and feel like betrayal. This one's good for fevers, she says, holding up something that resembles a wilted fern married to a spiderweb. Or it might cause sneezing fits. Either way, it gets things moving. You follow her deeper into the weeds, past a stump she claims used to scream at night, not haunted, just very opinionated. She collects things while muttering about the weather, about who's been spitting near her doorstep, and about how young people don't know the difference between mint and heartbreak. You nod a lot. You say nothing. You're not entirely sure what heartbreak looks like in plant form, but you're also not about to ask. Once back at her shack, she starts the boiling. A pot of water bubbles with leaves, twigs, bark, and at least one beetle that didn't get the evacuation notice. The smell is both sharp and sweet, like molasses left in a boot. She pours you a cup, tells you to sip slowly, and not to scream if your tongue goes numb. That's apparently part of the process. You sip. You do not scream, but your face contorts into a shape you didn't know it could make. There's no science to it. Not really. There's memory, experience, the occasional lucky guess, and a deep trust in the natural world to hurt you slightly less than the alternative. People out here grow up with poultices for wounds, powders for stomach aches, and tonics that taste like soap and panic. If it works, you remember it. If it doesn't, well, someone else will remember that for you. You hear stories of bark that stops bleeding, of roots that chase away fever dreams, of a flower that grows only in the shade of a grave and might cure sadness or cause it. You begin to understand that in the absence of doctors, everything becomes medicine, or at least is considered for the role mosses, ashes, burnt bread, frog skins dried in the sun. You thank Mabel and leave with a pouch of leaves, a warning about boiling times, and a vague fear that she may have hexed you just a little for stepping on her favourite weed. You don't know if it'll help. You don't know if it's safe, but you drink the brew again that night anyway, because the pain is real and the label on the pouch says better than nothing. Out here, health is an improvisation, and medicine is just a leaf away from mythology. Your tooth starts to ache in the middle of the night. It's a slow, throbbing pain at first, like someone tapping on the inside of your skull with a wet stick. You lie there with your hat pulled over your eyes, telling yourself it will pass, that it's just a piece of grit, a bad dream, a punishment for chewing old jerky too enthusiastically, but it doesn't pass. It gets worse. By dawn, it's no longer tapping, it's drilling. By noon, your entire head feels like it's pulsing in Morse code for help. There is no dentist. There's a man with pliers. His name is Clancy, and he used to shoe horses before something happened to his sense of empathy. Now he extracts teeth, tends bar, and moonlights as a fiddler, sometimes all in the same day. You find him behind the saloon sharpening something that might be a chisel or a fork. It's hard to tell from a distance, and harder still up close. You point at your face and make a noise somewhere between a groan and a polite introduction. He nods, like he's been expecting you. No one ever calls it an appointment. He gestures toward an upturned barrel and instructs you to sit. You ask if he'll use anything for the pain. He pulls out a flask and offers you a swig. You were hoping for alcohol, but it tastes like nail polish and melted raisins. It burns. It helps. Clancy doesn't wear gloves. He doesn't believe in them. He does believe in speed, spread, and humming while he works. He tilts your head back, examines the offending tooth with a squint that suggests he's mentally pricing your molar like a loose horseshoe, and then, without warning, begins the procedure. There is no anesthesia. There is no warning. There is a sharp pull, a crunch, and a noise you can't place somewhere between a door hinge and a dying bird. You grip the edge of the barrel. You bite your own tongue. You do not scream, but only because your mouth is otherwise occupied. And then, with a grunt and a final twist, the tooth is out. Clancy drops it in a tin with 3 others, wipes his hands on his trousers, and says, "That'll be 2 bits." You nod, drool, and wonder if anything about your skull still belongs to you. The hole in your gum pulses like a fresh insult. He gives you a wad of cloth soaked in something dark and sticky, and tells you to bite down until the bleeding stops or you lose interest. You stumble away with 1 less tooth and 3 new regrets. That night, you stare at the ceiling with a dull ache in your jaw, and the knowledge that the next time something hurts, you may just try to outlive it. The cure is worse than the condition, and the cure is Clancy. Out here, dentistry is not a science. It's a punishment delivered with tools and a shrug. And the only guarantee is that you'll leave them stay in pain, in blood, or in teeth. It starts with a cough. Not yours, not yet someone else's. A man in the saloon, maybe. A woman at the general store. A child too quiet for too long. Then it spreads. You hear it again later that week, echoing through the alley behind the blacksmiths, dry and deep like a broom being dragged across gravel. The town doesn't panic. It just goes quiet the way it does when thunder rolls in and nobody mentions the roof's been leaking for months. No one calls it by name. They say a fever's going around, or there's something in the air, or best not linger indoors too long. You stop shaking hands. You start noticing who's missing from church. Mabel the herbalist sells out of her bitterroot tinctures in a day, and suddenly everyone's brewing teas that smell like boiled weeds and misplaced optimism. You drink them because everyone else is. You drink them because not drinking feels like giving up. When the sickness reaches your boarding house, it announces itself with a sneeze that doesn't stop. Old Man Crawley is the first. He insists he's fine, just allergic to dust and young people. Then he stops coming downstairs. Then the landlord quietly nails his door shut. Not for punishment. For containment. You try to be cautious. You wash your hands as best you can. You sleep with your scarf tied over your mouth like a poorly informed bandit. You boil water and whisper hopeful things to your lungs. You leave food on the stairs for Crawley, though you're not sure who's taking it anymore. You hear noises at night, sometimes coughing, sometimes nothing. The sick are not sent anywhere. There's nowhere to send them. No hospital, no sanitarium, just spare rooms and crossed fingers. When someone dies, the undertaker is summoned with fewer words than usual, and the coffin is delivered without ceremony. The town continues. Shops stay open. Gossip persists, just quieter, the volume of rumour turned down to let the whispers of fever be heard. Then you cough. Once, twice. You pretend it was dust. You pretend a lot of things. You drink more tea, chew more bark, and avoid mirrors. You avoid eye contact too. Sickness here carries not just danger but shame. It means you failed to be hardy. It means you might cost someone their supper, their mother, their peace of mind. You get better, maybe. The cough fades. The fever never comes. Or perhaps it did and passed like a thief who decided you weren't worth the trouble. You don't talk about it. No one does. It passes or it doesn't. The town marks the change not in funerals but in the number of chairs set out at Sunday service. Out here, disease is just whether unpredictable, unwelcome, and always a little too familiar. You brace for it. You outwait it. And when it leaves, you wipe your nose, thank whatever gods still accept vague gestures, and pretend you never doubted your lungs. You trip over a root while walking back from the creek. It isn't a dramatic fall, no screaming, no slow motion, no cinematic flailing. Just one foot betraying the other, a brief plummet, and the crunch of your pride landing before your body does. You sit up slowly, inspecting the damage. Your ankle throbs, your palm is scraped raw, and your knee, which used to simply bend, now makes a sound like a reluctant draw. No one rushes to help you. There's no clinic, no stretcher. No kindly nurse with soft hands and efficient eyebrows. Just you, the dirt, and a vague sense of regret for ever thinking the ground was your friend. You hobble back into town, leaning on a stick that used to be a fence post and now serves as a medical degree in rural engineering. At the boarding house, you dig into your bag for supplies. There's a rag. Not clean, not sterile, but available. There's some whiskey, not the good kind, but the kind that burns feelings and most bacteria. You pour it on the scrape. You howl. You consider biting down on something but can't find anything soft enough that isn't alive. You wrap your palm in the rag and tie it off with a piece of string that was once part of your boots. It will do. Everything always has to. For the ankle, there's elevation achieved by stacking books, a saddlebag, and a dented pan under your leg until it's somewhere above your shame. You ice it with a cloth dipped in the last of your drinking water, which you now regret wasting on your skin instead of your mouth. Still, the throbbing slows to a rhythmic complaint instead of a panicked scream. That's progress. When others get hurt, things go similarly. One man slices his arm open chopping firewood. He shows up at the blacksmith's, not for tools, but because the blacksmith owns the sharpest needle in town. They heat it over the forge. They stitch without comment. Someone hums. No one faints, though a child nearby does vomit quietly into a bucket. Another time, a woman breaks her wrist falling from a ladder. The solution involves 2 sticks, a belt, and a prayer. Mostly the belt. You begin to develop a personal medical kit, shirt sleeve, matches, lint, bacon grease, and a spoon. It's not ideal, but it's flexible. If you can't fix something, you wrap it. If wrapping fails, you bind it tighter and walk slower. If walking fails, you sit, wait, and hope the sun rises kindly the next morning. The frontier doesn't give awards for resilience. It just stops noticing you once you can't stand. And so, everyone learns to limp with dignity, to bleed discreetly, and to count bruises only when they stop growing. Out here, survival means building a first aid kit from whatever didn't betray you that day, and hoping you remember which shirt sleeve wasn't already covered in yesterday's regrets. You put on your shirt and immediately feel betrayed. It's stiff, heavy, and smells like it spent the night in a barn, which, to be fair, it probably did. The fabric scratches your neck like it holds a personal grudge. It hangs from your shoulders like wet parchment and does a magnificent job of trapping both heat and sorrow. You button it anyway. Modesty, after all, is the only thing standing between you and being tackled by the town constable for indecent brazenness. Your trousers don't fare better. They're wool, which sounds fine in theory, warm, sturdy, traditional, but in practice means each step feels like negotiating with an aggressive rug. They chafe. They sag. They hold dust like secrets. You once tried to wash them and lost a whole afternoon watching them refuse to dry. Eventually you wore them damp, which made them shrink in strange, emotionally confusing directions. Boots are another problem entirely. You've broken them in, which mostly means they've broken you back. The leather is tough, inflexible, and quietly resentful. One boot squeaks, the other clicks. You've learned to walk in a way that sounds like you're being followed by a confused squirrel and a suspicious metronome. Inside each boot, your socks have given up. They're no longer socks, just tubes of thread held together by habit and regret. You wear layers because you have to. Not for fashion, not for flair, but because each layer provides one more barrier between your skin and the ever-present risk of being stubbed by a splinter, bitten by a beetle, or surprised by a cactus in the wrong place. You own 3 shirts. One is stained, one is patched, and the third is suspiciously damp no matter where you store it. You rotate them the way farmers rotate crops, reluctantly, and with damage control. When it rains, everything sticks. When it's hot, everything bakes. When it's cold, your clothes turn into rigid armor less helpful for warmth and more effective at ensuring your limbs forget how to bend. Taking them off is an event. Putting them back on is a tragedy. You've once watched a friend get stuck in a wool undershirt for 10 minutes, turning slowly in place like a ghost trying to escape its own haunting. Laundry day is chaos. You boil water, scrub with soap that smells like scorched fat, and pound your clothes on a rock like you're extracting confessions. Then you hang them up, only to watch the wind carry away one sleeve and a shred of your patience. Sometimes they dry stiff like cardboard. Sometimes they never dry at all. Either way, you put them back on with the resigned air of someone agreeing to re-enter a bad relationship because winter's coming and flannel is scarce. Out here, your clothes aren't just garments. They're armor, shelter, insulation, and torment all at once. They protect you from the elements just enough to remind you that the elements still want you gone. And somehow, the moment you tear one just a little, just a sleeve, you miss it like a friend who insulted you constantly but always showed up for dinner. You notice it most in the morning, that warm, greasy perfume that clings to your sleeves, your collar, your very soul. It's not cologne. It's not musk. It's bacon grease. You don't remember exactly when it started, but now it's there, like an old friend who never pays rent. Every time you cook, it settles into your skin like it has a lease. You wipe your hands on your trousers, your sleeves, a cloth, anything but a napkin, because napkins are for the rich or delusional. Bacon is the closest thing to a luxury that most folks get. It's food, flavor, fat, and fuel all in one strip. You fry it in the pan that also cooks your eggs, boils your beans, and occasionally serves as a makeshift hammer. The bacon curls and pops like it's angry at the pan. You flip it with a knife, a spoon, or whatever you can grab before the grease explodes onto your knuckles like a very small, very enthusiastic firework. Then, like a ritual, you pour the leftover grease into a jar. Not to throw away. Never. It's precious. It's multi-purpose. You use it to cook, You use it to oil your boots. Sometimes, in moments of desperation, you smear it across your cheek to keep the wind from cracking your skin. Once you used it to unstick a drawer. Once, a friend used it as pomade. The results were memorable. The flies thought so too. But the smell, that's the part that follows you. It's in your shirt, in your scarf, in the way your hair lifts slightly in the sun. Strangers can tell where you've been by scent alone. Dogs follow you with admiration. Cats follow you with suspicion. People nod at you like you're the kind of person who eats well and rarely burns breakfast. You take the compliment, even though it's more about survival than style. Soap can't remove it. Time can't erase it. Even a good rainstorm just relocates it slightly lower on your body. You try washing everything, your clothes, your hat, your hands, your soul, but the bacon lingers. It becomes a second skin. You smell like breakfast always, even when there's no food. Especially when there's no food. There's a comfort in it, a strange, greasy dignity. You may be covered in dust, wearing socks with holes and a shirt held together by buttons that have forgotten their purpose, but you smell like something warm, something cooked, something that suggests you haven't entirely given up. It's the frontier's cologne, gritty, practical, slightly offensive, and impossible to counterfeit. When someone hugs you, which is rare and usually accidental, they step back with a puzzled look and say, "Bacon." You nod. It's not a question. It's a fact, a way of life, a lifestyle brand without the branding. Out here, you don't smell clean. You smell human. And if that means you walk around scented like a skillet that dreams of better days, then so be it. At least you're not the one who smells like beans and shame. You grow up thinking cowboys are heroes, dramatic, dust-covered silhouettes who ride into town, solve problems, kiss someone handsome, and gallop off into the sunset with perfect posture. What you get instead is a man with sunburned arms, pants held together with string, and the kind of smell that suggests he's fought both a coyote and a bowel movement this week, and probably lost both fights. You meet him by the stables. His horse is asleep, standing up, like it's reconsidering all its decisions. He's brushing it with something that might be a bundle of grass or a section of his own beard. When you say hello, he grunts not rudely, just efficiently. Language, for him, is a tool used sparingly, like soap or feelings. Being a cowboy isn't glamorous. It's early mornings, long rides, and arguments with animals who deeply resent your leadership. You spend your days in the saddle, herding creatures that wander off with no warning and stare at you like your job is unnecessary. You yell. They ignore. You prod. They sulk. You sing to them sometimes, not because it helps, but because the silence starts to feel judgmental after mile 6. Your meals are cold beans, lukewarm coffee, and the occasional miracle biscuit someone smuggled from town. You sleep under the stars, which sounds romantic until a bat mistakes your face for a cave. Rain is personal. Wind is rude, and dust gets everywhere in your socks, in your coffee, in your sense of hope. You spit, and it's gritty. You smile, and your teeth crunch. Romance is rare. Most cowboys you meet haven't kissed anything living in years, unless you count their horse out of habit. They flirt like startled goats, a weird mix of shyness and shouting. One cowboy once offered a girl a snake skin as a courting gift. She accepted, then married someone with steady employment. And the guns, yes, there are guns, but not the kind you use daily. Bullets are expensive. Cleaning is tedious. Most shooting is done for practice, and most practice is done once a year, badly. If someone draws on you, chances are you'll hesitate, misfire, or drop the gun entirely. That's why cowboys carry ropes. It's not to look cool. It's because it works. You ride into town now and then, but not to swagger. You go to bathe, get patched up, and buy more beans. People eye you with curiosity, like you're part man, part dust storm. You nod politely. You buy tobacco. You try not to sneeze. Then you leave again before you do something dangerous like relax. Out here, a cowboy isn't a legend. He's a moving part of a larger process that never quite works. He rides, he works, he smells like animals and ambition. And he doesn't gallop off into sunsets, he limps into dusk with a sore back and a saddle sore the size of a walnut. But still, he keeps riding. because no one else wants the job. And someone's got to keep yelling at the cows. You hear the word gunslinger, and your imagination does the rest. Black hat, sharp eyes, a coat that flutters dramatically in non-existent wind. You picture someone who doesn't blink, doesn't sweat, and never misses. But when you meet one in town, leaning against a fence post that keeps trying to fall over, what you get is a man named Eli, who's chewing on a toothpick that seems to be chewing back. His holster is worn, not in a romantic way, but in the way leather gets when someone has sat in the dirt too many times. His boots don't match. His shirt was probably once white, before it entered a long and complicated relationship with tobacco, coffee, and despair. You introduce yourself. He spits near your foot and says, "Sure." He carries a pistol, yes, polished, heavy, possibly inherited from someone more successful. But he hasn't drawn it all day, or the day before that, or the week before that. Because here's the truth they don't print on dime novels: gunfights are rare, very rare. You don't shoot someone unless you have to, because bullets are expensive, witnesses are nosy, and dying is inconvenient. Most of Ellie's day is spent leaning against walls, against posts, against situations. He plays cards badly, drinks worse, and naps like it's a full-time job. Maybe it's the hat. Maybe it's the limp. Maybe it's just easier to believe someone's dangerous if they say nothing and squint a lot. You ask him if he's ever been in a real shootout. He shrugs. Once, he says. Didn't like it. Lot of noise. Too much dust. Got a rock in my boot. You wait for more, but that's the whole story. You nod, pretending you understand the subtleties of this emotional wound. And still he's got the aura. The myth follows him like a dog hoping for scraps. When he walks into the saloon, people get quieter. Not silent, just quiet, like they're giving fate a respectful head start. He orders coffee. Black. Always black. You ask if he takes sugar. He says, "I used to." Then he drinks it like it's penance. Once, a stranger came to town and asked for him by name. Eli sighed, stretched his back, and said, "Can it wait till after supper?" It could. They met at dawn the next day, walked out behind the church, and stood for 10 minutes saying nothing. In the end, they flipped a coin to see who got to leave town. Eli lost. He stayed. That's how disputes often resolve, not with bullets, but boredom, hunger, or indecision. So no, the gunslinger isn't a whirlwind of death. He's more like a sleeping bear, impressive from a distance, unpleasant up close, and mostly just trying to avoid unnecessary movement. Out here, being feared is a full-time job. Being bored is what you do between shifts. You think of a duel as something swift: 2 men, 1 insult, 10 paces, and then everything goes silent except for the echo of gunfire and one person dramatically collapsing into the dirt. But when a real duel begins in town, it starts the way gossip starts, with a misunderstanding, a poorly timed stare, and a third person who whispers, "Did you hear what he said about your boots?" The challenge is never shouted. It's muttered, mumbled. Sometimes it's communicated entirely through squinting and the kind of silence that feels heavy enough to trip over. A duel isn't just about guns. It's about pride, fear, and making sure there are enough people watching to validate the event. Without an audience, it's not justice. It's just murder with bad branding. The duel is set for noon. Always noon. Because the sun needs to be directly overhead for the dramatic shadows, and because no one wants to wait through lunch with unresolved animosity. You watch the day unfold slowly, like molasses being poured from a reluctant bottle. The 2 men avoid eye contact all morning. They eat quietly, badly, and often alone. One of them polishes his gun like it might develop feelings. The other writes a letter to his sister that ends with "unless." By the time noon arrives, the whole town is pretending they're not watching. People lean out of windows with laundry they aren't folding. The barber sweeps the same spot 3 times. The preacher holds a Bible and a sandwich. You find yourself standing near the water trough, pretending to care about the condition of the mud, just close enough to hear someone's last words, should they be poetic. Then the men arrive. They don't say much. They nod to the marshal, who is both referee and potential witness, and they take their places. 10 paces is a suggestion out here. Everyone measures with different shoes. They turn. They hesitate. And then, nothing. Not always, but often. One man blinks. One gun jams. One hand shakes. Someone's wife yells from the general store that supper's ready. The tension fizzles, collapses, and the moment passes like a thundercloud that decides not to strike. Sometimes a shot is fired into the sky, out of obligation. Sometimes both men agree to walk away and never mention it again. Sometimes they just forget what the argument was about. You hear later that one of them left town. You hear later that he went east, or maybe south, or maybe just to the next town over to try again with someone who didn't have such steady hands. You never learn who won, because in a duel that doesn't happen, no one wins and no one dies. It's strangely comforting. Out here, a duel is less about death and more about delay, a ritual, a pause, a long breath between two lives who weren't quite ready to stop breathing. And if someone does die, the town mourns quietly, not because they were a hero, but because they've now made everyone else's grudges feel slightly more urgent. You walk into the saloon expecting tension, flickering lamps, card cheats, maybe a fight over a spilled drink or a mysterious past. Instead, you find half a dozen men arguing about the size of a fish no one actually saw. The room smells like spilled whiskey, sawdust, old leather, and the stubborn echo of last week's mistake. The piano in the corner is missing 2 keys and several moral boundaries. A man named Silas is playing it anyway. You take a seat near the stove, because the fire there is only mildly aggressive, and you listen. That's all anyone ever really does in a saloon: listen, drink, and occasionally regret. The men at the table near you are deep into a story. It involves a gun, a snake, 3 chickens, and a mirror. It makes no sense. It doesn't have to. What matters is the tone, slow, serious, and just vague enough to suggest truth hiding beneath layers of exaggeration. One man says he once lassoed a bandit from a moving train. Another says he saw a lightning bolt split a horse in 2 and then watched both halves run away in opposite directions. Someone else claims his grandfather rode with Jesse James and taught him how to drink gunpowder without blinking. You nod. You don't question. Because questioning ruins the flavor, like adding water to soup that's already mostly wishful thinking. You hear a tale about a haunted outhouse that moves 20 feet every night. You hear about a gambler who could read minds but lost everything to a goat with better luck. You even hear one man claim he was once mistaken for Billy the Kid and challenged to a duel by a woman named Ruth, who now owns the general store and doesn't talk about her past. The bartender refills glasses with the precision of a man who knows when to stop listening and when to change the subject. He's heard it all. He might even believe some of it. But his main concern is that the stove stays hot, the floor stays clean enough, and no one uses the spittoon as a hat again. At some point, someone begins to swear on their mother's grave, forgetting that she's sitting 2 tables over and currently winning a game of dominoes. She glares. He changes his story slightly. The fish becomes a deer. The mirror becomes a window. The snake becomes some kind of worm. It doesn't matter. Everyone's still nodding, drinking, forgetting what part of the tale is supposed to be real. Out here, the saloon isn't a place for truth. It's a place for versioning. Every story is like a saddle worn, bent, familiar, and constantly reshaped by the person sitting in it. What starts as a stubbed toe becomes a gunfight. What was once a long walk becomes a narrow escape from certain death. History here is just memory with better lighting and worse witnesses. And when the night ends, you walk out wondering if you've just heard the past or helped invent it. You expect the horse to come galloping over the ridge, mane flying, eyes bright, ready to whisk you away from danger or toward glory. What you get is a creature named Clarence who is actively chewing on the wooden post he's tied to with the slow, deliberate spite of someone who knows you're late and wants you to suffer for it. He's not majestic. He's shaped like an overstuffed sofa and smells like a compost heap having an identity crisis. Mounting him is its own betrayal. The saddle creaks like an old man with secrets, and the stirrups seem to be placed at a height designed for someone either much taller or recently dislocated. You try to swing your leg over with grace, but grace leaves the scene immediately. You grunt. Clarence grunts louder. You finally get on, but only after using a nearby barrel and most of your dignity. Riding isn't peaceful. It's bumpy, loud, and full of decisions you don't get to make. Clarence chooses the path. Clarence chooses the speed. You are, in essence, luggage with complaints. The saddle isn't padded. It's a suggestion of padding a thin layer of sorrow resting atop a spine made of carpenter's tools. After an hour, your legs feel like boiled noodles and your back like a stack of badly arranged firewood. You speak to Clarence. He does not respond. You try clicking your tongue. He stops. You try nudging him with your heel. He moves sideways. You try promising him apples. He turns his head, snorts directly into your face, and resumes chewing nothing in particular. You begin to suspect that Clarence has read more about horses than you have. Other riders talk about their horses like friends, companions, partners in a great journey. Yours treats you like an unpaid intern. When you try to steer left, he veers right. When you dismount to stretch, he walks just far enough away that you have to chase him through prickly bushes while questioning every decision that led to this moment. The stable hands say Clarence is spirited, which you learn is code for will bite if given the opportunity. You bribe him with oats. You flatter him with compliments. You hum lullabies to him at night. Nothing changes. He tolerates you the way old chairs tolerate being sat on grudgingly, noisily, and only because gravity insists. When it rains, Clarence becomes slippery. When it's hot, he refuses to move faster than a reluctant crawl. When he's startled by thunder, wind, or the realization that you're steering, he bolts forward with all the grace of a wardrobe falling downstairs. And still, you ride him. Because walking is worse. Because he's what you've got. Because out here, your horse doesn't have to love you, he just has to not kill you in the first 10 miles. And in that way, Clarence is dependable, not noble, not swift, but solid, like a grumpy hill that occasionally sneezes. Out here, your horse is your partner. He just doesn't know it, or care. You sit outside the general store with a cup of coffee that tastes like regret and possibly beans. You sip slowly, watching the sun bake the dirt into clay and the clay into something resembling despair. The street is quiet, not peaceful, just stalled like a wagon stuck in mud, too stubborn to move and too proud to ask for help. You're waiting. The town is waiting. Someone said there'd be a showdown today. There's no exact time. Showdowns are scheduled by rumor and mood. Someone wronged someone else. Someone owes money, or honor, or a dented hat. There's talk of an insult that might have been a compliment, depending on the tone. No one's sure. The two men involved haven't been seen for hours. One might be napping. The other might have left entirely. Still, the town waits. You scan the buildings. Everyone is watching while pretending they aren't. The blacksmith's wiping down tools that don't need cleaning. The preacher is reading the Bible backwards, likely hoping for different results. Children have gathered under the water tower, placing quiet bets in pebbles and marbles. Even the dogs are lying low, ears perked, tails motionless, as if they've learned the rules of narrative tension. And so, time stretches. You drink more coffee. You shift in your chair. You begin to suspect that the chair is, in fact, tilting slightly left on purpose. The heat rises. The flies arrive. You swat them. They return. You swat again. They take it as a game. You start narrating your own boredom in your head just to stay awake. Then, movement. A man steps into the street. He's got the look. Long coat, wide hat, hand hovering near his holster. Across from him, another figure appears. They lock eyes. You hold your breath. A tumbleweed rolls dramatically across the road, clearly sensing its moment to shine. You wait. Everyone waits. The tension is a brick on your chest firm, dry, inconvenient. And then one of them sneezes. The other laughs. Someone claps. The moment dissolves like cheap sugar in cold water. Turns out it wasn't a showdown, just a greeting. Old friends meeting after years apart, reenacting their glory days like actors whose script went missing. The tension dies instantly. A few spectators groan. The children groan louder. One dog barks once. then goes back to sleep. You finish your coffee. It's still terrible. You stretch. Your back cracks like kindling. Another day, another almost. The drama will be retold tonight in the saloon, exaggerated, edited, adjusted by morning. It'll be a duel between legends interrupted by divine intervention or a wild bear. Out here, excitement doesn't come often. But when it does, it usually reschedules itself for tomorrow, or next week, or never. And you'll wait for it anyway, with coffee in one hand and lowered expectations in the other, because boredom out here is the only thing you can truly rely on to arrive exactly on time. You'd think the sheriff would stand out. A badge, a confident walk, a voice that commands attention. But when you finally meet him, he's sitting behind the jailhouse desk eating a sandwich with one hand and swatting at a persistent fly with the other. The badge is there, yes, dull bent, and held on with a safety pin. His boots are muddy. His hat has a dent that looks suspiciously like it came from an enthusiastic chicken. He introduces himself as Sheriff Ames. You ask if that's short for anything. He says, "Yeah, Amos," then keeps chewing. You sit. He doesn't ask why you're here, and you don't feel like explaining. There's a rhythm to the place, quiet, irregular, and slightly sticky. A wanted poster curls on the wall, like it's trying to escape. A stack of paperwork rests under the sheriff's coffee mug, stained and unread. You get the sense that crime happens out of respect for tradition, not urgency. Out here, being a lawman isn't about justice. It's about timing, patience, and not standing too close to anything flammable. Ames explains that his job mostly involves keeping drunkards from sleeping in the water trough, checking for counterfeit coins by biting them, obviously, and occasionally convincing people not to shoot their neighbors before supper. You ask if he carries a gun. He nods. You ask if it works. He shrugs. Haven't checked lately. There are rules, but they're flexible. Theft is bad, unless it's from someone no one likes. Fights are frowned upon, unless they're entertaining. Murder is unacceptable, unless both parties agree in advance and someone brings sandwiches. Jail isn't a punishment so much as a place to sober up and reflect on your recent life choices, while staring at a wall that smells like damp socks and regret. The criminals aren't exactly villains. Most of them are just unlucky. Some steal chickens. Some cheat at cards. One man was arrested for repeatedly yelling at the moon. He's still in a cell, muttering that it blinked first. The sheriff brings him stew and updates on the moon's behavior. No judgment, just routine. Sometimes a stranger rides into town with bad intentions, a bounty hunter, a runaway, someone who thinks they can take the place over with loud threats and flashy guns. The sheriff watches from his porch, lets them shout, then responds with a slow drawl and the kind of unflinching eye contact that makes people question their boots. Often, nothing comes of it. Occasionally, someone rides out of town slightly faster than they arrived, minus their dignity and a few teeth. You leave the jailhouse wondering how law survives here, but the truth is, it doesn't need to shine. It just needs to last. Out here, justice is less about order and more about maintenance, patching leaks, settling arguments, and making sure no one dies before the town's next dance. And Sheriff Ames? He finishes his sandwich, wipes his hands on yesterday's wanted poster, and mutters, "Hope the moon behaves tonight." You always imagined a bar fight would start with a glass shattering and end with someone being thrown through a window. Maybe there's a piano playing ragtime in the background. Maybe someone shouts, "He started it," and someone else flips a table in righteous indignation. But the truth is far less dramatic and significantly more awkward. It begins with a spill, someone bumps a table, someone's beer ends up on someone else's lap, and before anything is said, 5 people are already offering to pay for the drink, mop up the mess, and apologize on behalf of gravity. No one wants a real fight. Not because people aren't angry, they are. They're dusty, tired, and fueled by terrible whiskey, but because everyone knows how hard it is to find a good chair with all 4 legs still attached. Still, sometimes it happens. A shove, a harsh word about someone's horse or mother or hat size. The room doesn't go quiet. It goes tense like the moment just before a thunderclap. Everyone turns, eyes scanning for exits, safe corners, or a way to hide behind the piano without upsetting the pianist. Then it breaks. Not like glass, more like a sneeze sudden, a bit ridiculous, and impossible to stop halfway. A punch is thrown, but it hits someone unintended. That person reacts, not with another punch, but with a confused elbow and an apology. Someone falls backwards into a barrel of pickles that had no business being there. Someone else loses their hat, finds another, and wears it anyway. You get caught in the middle, not as a fighter, but as a bystander. You try to help by saying things like "let's all calm down and think of the furniture," but no one hears you, especially the man currently trying to wrangle a stool like it's a wild dog. Chairs creak. Boots slip. Someone yells something about beans. You're not sure what the beans did, but everyone agrees they were involved. Eventually it stops. Not because someone wins, but because everyone gets tired. The brawlers retreat to their corners, not corners exactly, more like upright wall-adjacent slumps, and begin apologizing. The bartender hands out towels like medals. The pianist resumes playing, skipping every third note, possibly out of protest. Someone finds a tooth and hands it to its presumed owner, who accepts it with a nod and a wince. You help stack a few chairs back into something chair-like. The floor is wet, the air smells like sweat and remorse, and someone is already telling a wildly inaccurate version of the event to a friend who missed the whole thing. You hear the words ambush, knife and bald eagle, none of which occurred. Out here, a bar fight isn't about violence. It's about tension deflating in the least graceful way possible. It's communal clumsiness. It's a way for people to yell without saying anything, and when it's over, no one talks about it directly. They just tip their hat, nurse their bruise, and quietly vow to drink slower next time. If there is a next time. There usually is. You walk past the post office and see your face staring back at you. Except it's not your face. It's someone else's nose, someone else's hat, and someone else's extremely optimistic sketch of cheekbones. But the name is close. Close enough to make you pause, squint, and wonder how many people in this town know you only by your boots. The poster reads, "Wanted $200 reward horse theft, card cheating, attempted sorcery." You haven't done any of those things. Recently, wanted posters are rarely accurate. They're drawn from memory, rumors, and the half-muttered testimony of a drunk man at the bar who once saw someone matching your general build steal a biscuit. The artist clearly had an agenda, or poor lighting, or a personal vendetta against noses. The description lists height, weight, hair color, and general aura of menace. You wonder if it's too late to walk differently. The sheriff says not to worry. He tells you they print posters like gossip fast, loose and loud. Most of the time, the accused shows up a week later, confused and holding groceries. One man was wanted for horse impersonation. He turned out to be a farmer with a limp and an unfortunately long face. The town quietly retired that poster, though someone keeps it behind the saloon bar as a conversation piece. Sometimes the crimes are real, but the stories surrounding them grow like weeds after rain. A pickpocket becomes a stagecoach robber. A cheating gambler becomes an outlaw mastermind. A man who once argued with a priest becomes the leader of a cult with no members and a suspicious number of goats. Fame arrives whether you deserve it or not, and once your name's on paper, it's as good as carved into the town's imagination. Children gather near the posters and debate which outlaw is the most dangerous. They rank you below Peg-Leg Tony, but above Mild Dave, who once stole 2 spoons and felt bad about it. You wonder whether you should be insulted or relieved. Meanwhile, someone draws a mustache on your poster, then horns, then something anatomically confusing. You stop looking. The problem is, once the poster exists, people treat you differently. They lean back a little when you enter the room. They speak your name slowly, like testing its weight. One woman gives you a free coffee and won't say why. Another man offers you a job watching over his cows, just in case you're good at disappearing. You're not sure what's worse, being falsely accused or being taken seriously. You consider leaving town, but realize that leaving might look like fleeing. So you stay. You tip your hat lower. You avoid walking in a straight line. You learn to speak with fewer words and more shrugs. And when someone mentions the poster, you smile, say not me, and hope they believe it, or at least pretend to. Out here, truth is optional, but reputation is permanent. And sometimes the only thing separating a hero from a villain is who got their face drawn first. The sun begins to fold itself into the hills, turning the sky the colour of warm rust and forgotten fruit. You sit on the porch of the boarding house, your boots off, your socks gently steaming from a day that involved more dust than should be legal. The air cools, the light softens, and for the first time all day, the town begins to breathe like it isn't holding in bad news. Children are still yelling, but less like wild birds and more like tired ones. Someone plays a slow tune on a harmonica 2 buildings down, and it's out of tune in a way that feels deliberate. The saloon doors creak. A dog scratches itself in a rhythm that matches the fading sound of the blacksmith hammering his last horseshoe. And you just sit there, letting the splinters of the porch embed themselves lightly in your rear as a form of subtle massage. No one died today. No gunfights. No bar brawls that required stitches or apologies. No one set anything on fire accidentally, though someone did try to boil coffee with a lantern and made a smell no one will forget. The sheriff only had to shout once. The preacher only had to forgive twice. And someone fixed the sign on the general store so that it now reads salt instead of salt with feelings. This is what most days end like. Not in glory, not in blood, but in that soft, stubborn rhythm of a town that barely works, barely changes, but somehow doesn't fall apart. You watch a couple walk down the main road, not fast, not slow, just in that sideways saunter that says they're together because it's easier than being alone. A tumbleweed rolls past them, not because it's dramatic, but because the wind hasn't learned in anything new. You remember everything that didn't happen today. The outlaw that didn't show, the storm that didn't come, the promise you didn't make. And somehow, that feels heavier than the things that did. You didn't get rich. You didn't get famous. You didn't even get clean. But you didn't lose anything either. And out here, that counts. Inside, someone's lighting lamps. Moths gather immediately, crashing into glass with the same enthusiasm you once had for ambition. The piano plays 3 correct notes, then gives up. You smell bread baking somewhere, or at least you imagine you do. The ache in your feet starts to feel like background noise. The town leans into dusk with the confidence of a crooked chair that's used to being sat on too hard. And you, with your back against the wall and your cup half full of something that tastes like boiled tobacco, finally exhale. Not because the day was good, but because it ended. Out here, the victories are small. Your boots are still under the bench. Your teeth are still in your head. The world didn't change. You didn't either. And somehow, that's enough. The night settles in like an old coat, frayed, familiar, just warm enough to forget the holes. The wind softens, the dust lies down, and the town breathes in unison with the stars it can't quite reach. Somewhere, a door creaks closed. Somewhere else, laughter flickers and fades like a match struck for comfort, not light. You've made it to the end, not victorious, not transformed, but intact, which, out here, is as close to a miracle as anyone expects. So thank you for staying, for listening, for wandering quietly through this long day with me. And now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you.